Well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's free training put on by the School of Traditional Skills. I'm your host, Josh Thomas, and I'm looking forward to having Brandon Sheard, the Farmstead Meatsmith, join us in just a few minutes to talk about home scale butchery, 3 steps to stress-free home butchering that you need to know. I think we're actually going to probably dive a little bit deeper than that. Brandon is always a wealth of information. Super excited to have him here and super excited to have all of you here. There's already over 1,100 people and more coming in quickly. So we're going to take care of a little housekeeping while we give everybody a few minutes to get here. And then we will get started with the subject at hand. So first of all, if you're coming in, a lot of you already been doing that. Make sure and jump into the comments. Let us know you're here, where you're from, what you're excited about getting from this training today. We have people, I've been watching the chat before I came on here. I think there's people from just about every state in the country. And we've definitely got a lot of friends from Canada and some friends from down under in Australia, and I'm sure a few other places. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. If you are new to School of Traditional Skills or these live trainings, we do a free live training with a guest instructor every month. And of course, the school also has classes and a community and lots of things that I'll tell you about a little bit later in the presentation. But we're glad we're here. We're glad you're here. And hey, it's Thanksgiving in a week, you guys. I want to say happy Thanksgiving to our members, our subscribers, and those of you that might be new to the School of Traditional Skills. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you have a great holiday next week when that comes. Let's see here. Yeah, we still got people pouring in a few things. There will be a replay. I know sometimes your internet goes bad. You got to go. You got to take care of something. There's a fire on the homestead, or you got to go pick the kids up from school, or whatever it may be. So do know that there will be a free replay available to you for a few days. We will send the link out for that this evening after the training is over. It takes a little bit of time for our production team to get that prepared for you. But we'll get it out to you, and that's available for several days for free. You can also own it as part of the school along with all the other live trainings, or you can get access to it, and I'll let you know more about that later. You're going to have questions today. I know that for sure. We're going to spend the last part of our 2 hours together. I'm going to field questions for you to Brandon directly, so he'll answer as many as we can live. Please hold those questions until we get to that time so it doesn't, one, they'll get lost if you put them into the regular chat. We won't see them. 2, we might answer them during the first hour. So just hold on to them. And if we haven't answered them, I'll let you know when it's time to put them into the Q&A section so that we can do the best at answering those. Let's see here. We've got some fun stuff as well during the Q&A this afternoon. We're going to be doing some giveaways. I'm going to give away a lifetime membership to the School of Traditional Skills. Going to be giving away the knife that Brandon recommends and uses in the class and that you'll see in the training today. So going to be excited to give one of those away. And also going to give away one of our new booklets here. This is a compilation of homestead mindsets from the School of Traditional Skills Summit back in September. So we're going to give one of those away as well. So make sure to hang out for that. You have to be here to win. And I will give you instructions on how to win those. That'll be in the second half of the hour. I think that's about it. We got a replay. Hold your questions and hang out for the giveaways. And let's see here. Yeah, we've got about 1,400 people and more coming in. I'm thankful that you guys are here with us today. Home butchery sometimes is a tough, decisive topic. For some of you, this is secondhand and you're very familiar with it. Some of you, this is very new and there's trepidation, and that is completely understandable. Brandon's going to cover a lot of that today. A lot of what gets in the way in home butchery is our own emotions and our feelings about it. And then just some knowledge about working with the animals. And Brandon's going to walk you through that. While I've been processing animals for nearly 20 years, I really refined my methods and got a lot more knowledgeable from Brandon himself I think nearly 10 years ago now. And there was always something to learn from him. He is a wealth of knowledge and encouragement, and I love the way he approaches home butchery and respect for the animals and the life that they provide, and yet having to step through the process of death on into getting food to our table. He does an amazing job at that. So I want to encourage you. that wherever you're at in your journey, I'm glad you're here and you are going to learn something today. I also want to strongly encourage you that this is normal. It is the kind and humane way to give the animals you've raised an exit from this life. And it is a much, much better option, a much more humane option than the industrial way. Much, much better. Our guest today, Brandon Sheard, had his own journey to home butchering. He was a city kid. He didn't work on a farm until he was an adult. And his approach to harvesting your animals is one filled with kindness, clarity, and purpose. And I believe it's going to resonate with you no matter how you feel about it or how much experience you have. Now, I want to give a disclaimer, though. For those of you, there may be some of our vegan friends here in the audience or somebody that this is really, really new to you, or you're not even sure if you're on board. If you're not interested in learning about home butchery, if you're not interested in learning how to handle animals well in order to take them through the kill, the evisceration, that is the gutting, the cutting up of the meat, this isn't the discussion for you. I want to suggest that you may not want to be here for this, and it's not the place to discuss whether or not this is something to do. That's a different discussion. So just want to encourage you that we're here today to talk about this, not whether it's a good idea or not, and looking forward to it. But before we bring Brandon on, I want to know where you're at with this important but challenging skill. So let me know in the comments. I'm going to give you a couple options here, and just raise your hands or say, yep, that's me. And these options that I give you to let me know where you're at in your stage of home butchery. So you might be here today convinced you could never process an animal you raised. You might feel emotional, upset, or scared at the thought. If this is you, let us know. It's okay, but let us know if you're brand new and this is just even a challenging thought for you, but you want to get past that. This is the place for you. Brandon is really, really going to help with that. You're going to walk away, I think, confident and inspired. Now, you may be on board with the concept, but confused about where to start. Maybe you're just a little bit nervous that you'll get the cuts wrong, or the meat will go bad, or you're going to provide a bad experience for the animal or for yourself. And there's a lot of people at that stage, and that is normal. That's okay. This is a process that we learn. Learning a new skill requires both a desire to do it and the knowledge to do it well. So we're going to help you get started here today. And I just want to reassure you that you can do this. You can get through this. Now, maybe you've already gotten started. Maybe you've processed some meat birds, or you've helped somebody process an animal during hunting season, or maybe you've done a little bit of this already, but you're still lacking some confidence and you need a step-by-step guide. Very, very normal, and that's okay too. And this training today is going to help you with that process. You're going to learn some great tips, and I think learn a few things about the places that you get hung up on. So this is for you. Just hang out. I think this is going to really help. Lastly, maybe you're already all in. You may be very familiar. That's myself here. I'm all in. I've been doing this for a long time. It's not new, but there's always something new to learn. And that is great here too. When you're hanging out with somebody like Brandon, you are going to learn something. And, we have a full class in the school that he taught. I was just watching some of that, and right within the first few minutes of it, I learned 3 or 4 new things. And so you're going to learn something today, even this is already feeling a little old hat for you. Now, I want to say we are talking about sheep. That's what we're demonstrating. Because it's a small room in it, it's accessible, it's a great place to start, and it's applicable to other animals like goats and deer, and it's a good starting place to launch you into other animals. So know that we're strategic in talking about sheep. There's a reason for that. We can't cover it all in one session, but this is a great starting place. Now, harvesting your animals yourself is a crucial element of resiliency, in my opinion, but it can feel daunting to get started. It matters, and this is something that you need to get right. Instead of scouring the internet, though, for reliable sources, you do need a guide, and that is exactly why I brought Brandon Sheard here today. His extensive knowledge and experience with butchering at home will put you at ease, and I think it's really going to inspire you to step out into this, whether you're making improvements to your technique or whether you're brand new. He's the right guide to show you how to approach home butchery with confidence, clarity, and peace of mind. Now, Brandon, similar to me, was raised in Southern California suburbia, not in the country. And like so many of us, he didn't grow up around farm animals or traditional skills. So know that you've got somebody that's coming from the same place that many of you may be. He learned how to butcher while working on a farm, and he quickly became the head butcher. He took to the skill very, very naturally. Brandon believes that it was learning how to cook. Sorry about that. Got a little lost there and distracted for a second. Brandon believes that it was learning how to cook meat properly. That was the key to unlocking the entire traditional process of holistic animal harvesting. Brandon's the real deal, you guys. He's living this. He made a commitment many years ago after learning about the way our meat is processed in the industrial method, from the way it's raised, the way it's processed. And he made a commitment to never buy store-bought meat again. So he had to learn to master this skill and to make it work for him. He not only raises and butchers his own meat, but holds workshops and has online classes teaching others how to do the same thing through his home business, the Farmstead Meatsmith. Let's welcome Brandon. Hey, Brandon, how you doing today?
It's good. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, man, absolutely. Always a pleasure to get to hang out with you. Like I was telling everybody here, always something to learn new from you and to be inspired. So I'm happy to dive into the subject matter, but I want to say congratulations because I just heard that you guys are expecting a baby.
We are. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, right on. When's the due date?
Well, Good Friday or thereabouts, right around Easter.
All right. Very cool.
Yeah. So we're very happy.
Congratulations. Always excited to welcome a new life into this world. So
indeed.
Awesome for you guys. Now today you're going to help us get prepared to have the least stressful butchering experience possible. And I think really it's that stress that gets in the way for most of us. That's one to hurdle. And this is from the kill. And I'd say even before the kill, we're going to talk about a lot of this is in handling the animal and that part of the process. So even pre-kill to kill to cutting up, we're gonna touch all of these items today. But first off, tell us how to handle the emotional side of killing an animal that we've raised and enjoyed, because this is a hurdle for people.
Yeah, especially since, if you're intentional about it, and which anybody is going to be if you haven't grown up in the industrial, animal production system. You're going to have a small group of animals and you're going to have affection for them. And that affection is ordered. It's good. It's true. And the key, though, I think, is to use that affection in a rational way that is good for the creature. And it doesn't take long after being on a farm, especially a small scale, just domestic scale, homestead situation, to realize that the death of your livestock is not an option. It's an inevitability, and it's totally essential to the management and the order of the rest of your animals and of your pasture and of everything. It's their final cause to give their life. And when you understand that, it feels, on a very rational degree, then I think you're freed up from what would otherwise kind of be clouding emotion that can cloud your judgment. And you're freed up to understand the sheep or, the pig or whatever it is you happen to be harvesting. And when you do that, when you understand its nature, then you can most rightly and decisively deliver the kill. So it's really, if you feel trepidation about it, if you feel fearful about harvesting a sheep for whom you have affection, realize that that's actually the basis for qualifying you to be the best person to take that animal's life. Because if you rule by reason, it's going to guide you to be quick and decisive. It's easy to kind of rebuke yourself for feeling like, oh, it's cold and calculated, but you got to remember that real love, real affection for that creature is based on knowing that creature and what it is. And when we get kind of caught up in, the heady emotion of the moment, it tends to be more selfishly oriented. It's uncomfortable on our end. But when you can kind of sacrifice that comfort and that idea of yourself and do the job at hand for the good of the sheep, It is unequivocally to take that sheep's life quickly and decisively. Yeah, because especially since the natural, so-called natural death of that sheep, just to keep living, there is no more torturous death that you could inflict upon a sheep or any livestock than to just let it die of old age, of natural causes. It's a horrific experience, which I can share plenty of examples of, because I've been called on not just to be a slaughterman, but sometimes a knacker, where you come at the end, an animal that's wasted away and is already decomposing interiorly in unimaginable pain, that should have been harvested much earlier.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way that helps us to look at it. You mentioned how it's an important part of livestock management, and if we have animals, death is a part of the cycle, right? And nature has a way of handling this. The industrial food supply has a way of handling this, vastly different. But that animal's life is going to come to an end. So we can really control both the quality of the life of that animal and the quality of the death in a way that is better, I'd almost even argue, than sometimes in nature for the actual experience of that animal.
Absolutely. I think unequivocally, every time, a farm death at the hand of the farmer is always going to be better than death by predator or by illness and old age. Every time, even if you mess up. And that's, we'll go through exactly how to set yourself up to not make mistakes, but it does help to start with humility and just know you are trying a difficult thing that we haven't done as a society, as a people, and a couple generations we're totally alienated from. So it's important to realize that only them as attempts to kill them can make mistakes. Like you're starting to try a difficult thing that we're not used to. But you can let that affection, your more rational affection for that animal, be your guide to deliver that quick kill, which will be incalculably better than death in the wild, which is unmitigated pain.
Yep. What are some practical or tangible things people can do to use their emotions and use where they're at to translate that into reasonable action?
Yeah, I find that you kind of have to get out of your own head a little bit, and out of your own emotional state, which, if you're a parent, or I don't know, if you're in charge of anything, you know what that particular action feels like. You've got to subdue the boiling passions that are trying to blind you to what's going on and shoot you in many different directions impulsively. It really helps to slow down. And I think the perfect way to begin to do that is you got to stop anthropomorphizing the animals that we raise, which just means you got to understand their nature. You got to look at them and understand what they are by how they act. And that's huge. Because then you will be less likely to impose your emotional state upon them, which they don't have. And one of the elements of their nature is that these animals don't directly fear death, right? They don't fear. What they do fear actually is separation, from the herd. And you can only perceive that if you're cool-headed, you're not overcome by emotion in the moment, and you can see, oh, this is a herding animal. Its entire tranquility, its peaceful mode of being rather than its panicked mode of being. You can discern those things. And its peace comes from being with the herd. And so this goes across the board. You got to understand the nature of the sheep, the nature of the pig, the nature of the chicken, in order to take its life in a peaceful manner, in a dignified manner, with less coercion involved. And a lot of that too that's literally a skill that you can actually practice with sheep physically. And you can practice restraining them. You can practice what we'll call sheep jujitsu and talk about it as we go, where you understand the sheep as a flight animal, right? It's a prey animal. When it encounters a threat, it has one plan, and it's plan B, C, D, all the way down to the alphabet. And that plan is flee. That's the whole plan. And the thing about a sheep is, and all of these animals especially, is their mentality is embodied, So if they are fleeing, they find themselves panicking, if that makes sense. And the converse of that means if you can restrain flight, you have a calm animal. And so practicing absolute restraint of the animal, and this is why you don't want to be clouded by emotion, because to someone who doesn't know, who might be sort of blinded by passion and a misguided affection for the sheep, watching someone handle the sheep rightly and decisively without letting it escape in any way or even have a hint of escape, it looks violent, but it is precisely the opposite. It's exactly how you guarantee tranquility and peace for that sheep, by decisively removing flight.
I want to point out to everybody here, we're talking about sheep because we need a demonstration animal, right? But this is applicable to any ruminant you might be working with, or an omnivore like a pig, to any of your animals that wherever you're at in your journey and whatever you might be considering working with. This is applicable across the board, this way of approaching thing. And this kind of leads right into the beginning of the teaching and just that practice of handling the animal. And so Brandon, just take us through a few steps here to practically working with and handling the animal.
Yeah. And it's like we said, each animal is different because it has a different nature, and you can discern its nature objectively and accurately by how it acts. So pigs are super cerebral, and that's why what we're going to demonstrate with a sheep does not work with a pig. They don't like being handled. They don't like being physically manipulated. They object vociferously if you attempt such a thing. Whereas sheep, on the other hand, we do have the physical strength and capability to handle them decisively enough that it makes sense to kill them the way that we'll show you. So you just have to take into account each animal, and which means you have to be docile to their nature. Try to understand their nature. The same thing with a chicken. Its goal is flight when it feels pursued by a prey animal. So if you can restrain its wings and prevent it from running, you have a calm chicken, decisively calm. So in the case of a sheep, you can practice this, and the basic elemental principle is don't chase, don't become the predator. Flight follows upon chase. That sheep will flee you if you're running. And so what I'd like to do is very gently and ideally lead the sheep into a smaller corral. In a smaller corral, there's less flight that is possible, right? That sheep can't run very far. But even then, in the corral, you can still do a lot to restrain even a few steps of flight. And the more flight you restrain, the more calm that sheep will be. And so it's very much a matter of, throughout the whole process, not playing the part of the predator, not chasing, not running, which requires a considerable amount of patience on your part as the slaughterman.
Slow is fast. That is what I tell my kids all the time. When we slow down, when we adopt the mentality that you're talking about and slow down, we actually get in harmony. We actually are able to work with the animals, not just in this process, but just in any process of working with the animals. Everything slows down. They slow down and things start to work. When you go fast and you chase, you run at them, you get all excited, it goes bad. But that's our tendency, right? Is to run in and push real hard, and we've got to resist that.
Yeah. No, what a lot of people do is you have to understand with a prey animal like a sheep, when they are going in the direction you want at a slow pace, we tend to punish them. You know what I mean? By more chasing. And so we'll get excited. Oh, he's going in the right direction. And so we'll actually push them harder. And that's actually punishing them for what they want. You actually let back on the pressure when they're going the direction you want. And, if they stop and nibble on the way to the stall that you're putting them in, that's great. That means they are calm. And any, just like you say, any slowing down of the pace is going to be nothing to the time that you will lose chasing a sheep all over creation and over fences and through hedges and, cross roads and everything. So just don't even begin the chase at the beginning.
Right. Besides, yeah, and what that does to the meat, right? So talk to us a minute about the physical changes that happen when those animals do go into flight mode.
Yes, yeah, it's oddly enough, it tends to be more a pork thing, but it can manifest in other animals too, and some of them are genetically prone to it more so than others. The industrial breeds that are grown for leanness and fast growth, they tend to have a larger adrenal gland. Believe it or not, it's part of the genetic, qualities that they're selecting from industrial breeds, which are much different than heritage breeds, older breeds that come from the homestead originally. They don't have that. And
Hmm.
so what can happen is a lactic acid dump into the muscle tissue. In the case of pigs, in cows, you can get dark cutting meat, which is, it doesn't taste quite right. And it's really dark, almost like a burgundy color. And it all results from just an excessive high RPM panic situation right before the kill. And it's something to be avoided. And it's something that you will inevitably, there's only so many times you do that on a small home scale before you realize that is not a sustainable way to do things going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to us about, you mentioned this earlier. Let's talk about sheep jujitsu. That's a very interesting term, but the actual literal meaning is pretty cool.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu is the gentle art, and it's a martial art, originally from Japan. That's kind of been become very popular through the media and everything, and schools all over the country. But the cool thing about jiu-jitsu is that it is not strength dependent. It was developed in order for a younger, smaller person to be able to control a larger person without strikes or kicks or doing lots of damage. And so it has this gentleness to it. And I think the key is that it's not based upon excessive exertion, which is what we want to do, right? Especially if the emotions are high. And they tend to be that, when there's anxiety around harvesting an animal. And so it's something you can practice. That's the cool thing. We do sheep jujitsu when we restrain the animal before we deliver the kill. And in the case of these sheeps, we're delivering the kill just with the knife. There's no bullet to the brain, which we can talk about why we might do that. But what that means is you have to close the distance all the way to the sheep. You have to lay hands upon it, and you have to control it absolutely, for the sheep's sake. That's why you have to have absolute control over the body, because they will stay calm if you do. It's really quite remarkable. And the key is just to take advantage of the limits of their own physiology to control them, rather than just, white knuckling, hugging and squeezing and restraint. And you'll learn this, and it's a thing you can practice. You can practice it before, a sheep you don't even tend to kill, at least not for several months. Practice it several times, handling him properly. And you'll find that if you can elevate a sheep's head and keep them straight, looking straight up at the sky, you can even, and we cover all of this in the class, you can even insert a thumb into its jaw, into its mouth, behind its front teeth. And they're very distracted by that. They don't think about fleeing when they're nibbling on your thumb. They don't have teeth there, so it's not harmful. And then you want to lay them down on their rear end, so they're sitting. And basically, what the sheep jiu-jitsu entails is getting their forelegs off the ground, because again, their plan B is run, and that's always going to be their reaction that causes panic in them. If you can get 4 feet off the ground, that's it. They have no other plan. They don't have another option. And so they don't panic. And that's what the sheep jiu-jitsu does, is lets you get those forelegs off the ground. You've seen sheep shearers handle sheep the similar way, and the sheep really aren't panicking in the midst of that whole process. Lay them down on their side, and then you have a calm sheep in control, without you having used excessive power and force and sweating and everything. So it's definitely something you can practice and get good at.
Yeah, and I think it's probably one of the more challenging parts, besides maybe the actual kill emotionally for some people, but it's one of the more challenging parts of the process and doing this well. So we're gonna show you guys a little bit of video. This is a piece of a lesson from the full class at the School of Traditional Skills. Now, to be clear, we're not showing the kill. We're going to show you handling, I think, right up to that point. We're not demonstrating that here, so you don't have to worry about that if you got little eyes or whatever. But we'll go through that, and we can talk about the kill and some of those pieces after the video. So let's go ahead and roll that.
So once you have the sheep penned so that they can't sprint or flee, you still have to approach them calmly, because even in a smaller space, they can still flee. And so it might actually feel a little forceful or aggressive on your part, but it's really essential that you be decisive in all your movements and grab the sheep decisively, because the moment they slip your grasp or find themselves able to get away from you, their panic increases. The more decisively and firmly you hold them, the more calm they will be, because they won't be able to flee. And so in this case, I'm going to grab the sheep, and keeping a nice sturdy hold on it, I may even pick up its front legs so that it can't gain a footing and again start to flee. And then I'll bring the sheep out here, and we'll do the kill outside with only a knife. And all of this build up to the kill really just serves to emphasize the point that even more important than the precise method you use to kill the animal is the build up to it. Because in the end, a peaceful death only happens when you have a peaceful animal, a peaceful victim. And that is all about the buildup, all about preventing flight and panic. So now the key is just to retain a firm hold on the sheep. And I'm going to lay it down all while keeping close contact and connection with the sheep so that it cannot struggle its way free. And that is actually how you keep the slaughter as calm as it can be. So you can get beside the sheep, and we're going to actually lay it down on its side. And if you hold it firmly enough, the sheep is going to give up. And it will actually find, because you've removed plan B, which is flight. They really only have one plan, and it's flight. And if you can remove that from them, they surrender. And the sheep will actually get as close as is possible by its nature to surrender its life. So I've got the sheep down, and I'm keeping it tipped so it can't get its legs underneath it. I'm not pushing down very hard. I'm keeping a hold on the flank, and I've got a hold on the bottom jaw. You can see how the neck is at right angles to the spine, and its ears and eyes are flat on the earth. It won't work if the head is turned to the side. You can maintain the calmness and the stillness by keeping its head totally flat.
Okay, good demonstration. Walk us through that a little bit. I was wondering why the head needs and eyes need to be down, not sideways. That was one of the first things when I saw this the first time. I definitely hadn't seen that before. And you were very specific about that.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons. One is it makes the delivery of the kill cut much easier. It basically makes the target that you're aiming for with your scary sharp knife very apparent, very obvious. and impossible to miss. So that's one reason, and we will probably talk more about that too. But the other is very disorienting physically for the sheep. It's another way to eliminate flight from the sheep. You'll see, this happen in rodeos sometimes, in cattle roping. When they can control the head of that steer, the rest of the body tends to follow. And it's the same kind of principle with that sheep. You can see, at least in that video, when I had its head flat, ears and eyes flat on the grass like that, the sheep was still. But then the moment I said, don't do it on the side, the sheep started to struggle again. And then you turn it back and they're still again. So it's very much it just achieves stillness, almost guaranteed. And those are the two main reasons I think I employ that method.
Good. I know we'll probably talk a little bit about the kill. We're not going to show it here, but we'll talk a little bit about it in a moment. But I would like to just briefly, we'll keep this short, discuss why you're demonstrating this process with a knife as opposed to a firearm, which would be a lot of people's think that they would go to. So I just love for people to know your reasoning here in this situation for handling this with a knife.
Yeah, so I think that there's so many reasons. It's hard to pick one, but there's definitely part of the nature of the sheep is it's not terribly cerebral in the sense that we think of it. And so when you can control that body, you've achieved tranquility on that sheep as much as possible. Whereas that's not possible with a pig. The only way you can really get tranquility with a pig is to take out the brain first. So it has to do partly, I think, with the nature of the sheep. But one of the main reasons is if you want to salvage the head, if you want to utilize the yield of the sheep's head, which is non-trivial, it's great for the stock pot and for braising and other things, you're going to use a small round. You're not going to use a huge hunting rifle. And if you're going to use a small round, it's not terribly easy to shoot a sheep in the head. They don't have a forehead, if that makes sense. They have a very flat-topped head. And the thing about shooting an animal to kill it is that on the farm, you got to hit brain or there is no death. If you just hit the head in a general sense, now you just have a very wounded animal that is in extreme amounts of pain. And the sheep's brain is not terribly large, and it's kind of a tricky target to aim for. Usually, if you have to shoot a sheep, and sometimes I do if I am unable, for whatever reason, to execute that good build up to the kill. If I can't do the sheep jujitsu, maybe he's a 200-pound ram and he's 8 years old, and my back hurts, and I don't think I have the physical, strength to manage that guy, then I will do the bullet. So at the end of the day, it's really whichever kill method you are most confident in. And it's just with the bullet, I think people tend to be a little overconfident because they don't realize that you have to hit brain. It's brain or there's no death. And the brain, turns out, is a small target. Yeah, so that's kind of the main reason. And with the knife, it's the most intimate kill, which means it is the one that you can guarantee with the most certitude will result in a very quick death. When you cut that neck and you get the two jugular arteries evacuating the blood supply, that you will see the eyes change and roll back, and you'll see the sheep go out of consciousness in less than a minute. It's very, very quick. Whereas some have argued, and they've done studies on this, tracking the sensation of pain and panic in the brains of ruminants, that they actually register more instantaneous immediate pain through the impact of a captive bolt or a bullet, which it kind of makes sense if you think about the way a sheep's head is made. It's structured for impact. It's actually quite a dense part of their skull that you have to shoot through. So all of that to say, I think the main thing about the nature of the sheep is you control the mind more by controlling the body. You can exert more absolute control and achieve more peace by controlling their body. more decisive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's really important for new people too, is really what you're demonstrating is that it is a lot easier to ensure that you have a clean, quick, humane kill with that method. And it looks easy. Again, you think that's simple and fast, but just myself having killed a lot of animals and having had a lot of things go wrong at different times, even being a good marksman and a very good with a firearm, this method just pretty much ensures that you're going to do this the way you're intending to, and not have near as likelihood of the mistakes that can happen with a firearm.
Exactly.
Besides not having to worry about a firearm in small quarters, which many people are going to be in.
Yes, precisely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's set the stage for harvesting a sheep. So we've kind of done this demonstration, and you talk about this from pasture to plate. So let's start walking through the steps here of getting from, where you're at there to these 3 days of process of working through pasture to plate.
Yeah. So I think, it's fortunately with a sheep, it's pretty simple. I like to just give yourself one stage of preparation to get everything ready, and which usually means just gather the equipment, which is pretty simple. And then one day is going to be the kill, the skinning, and the evisceration, which is the removal of the guts, and chilling. And then the final day is going to be when you cut and wrap the meat for the freezer, or cut and cure it, and otherwise make it ready for the kitchen more directly. And fortunately, I mean, it's a very simple thing to be prepared on your land to harvest your animals. And I think it's totally essential. We've already kind of mentioned it, but if you can be ready to harvest an animal when it needs to be harvested, at the drop of a hat, all the time, you will have a healthy, thriving farm. You won't have extraneous animals wandering around that need to be removed from the ordered management of your pastures and your livestock. So preparation is pretty key.
Well, good. Let's talk about step one and day 0, as I have it here in my notes, that preparation and gathering your tools.
Yeah. So the number one tool that I tell people is totally essential for all livestock harvesting, is kind of obvious, but often neglected. I always say, stop everything and learn how to sharpen your knife. So scary sharp knife is totally essential. If your knife is sharp, then all harvesting, all butchery in your backyard is as easy as you imagine it to be. Because it is actually quite simple. It's a simple narrative. The steps are not that complex, honestly. You can do it. But if your knife is dull, then every single step is impossibly complex. Your main tool is working against you the whole time. The killing method in the class that we demonstrate is crazy impossible. You're not going to be able to do it with a dull knife. So usually what I mean by a scary sharp knife is one that is made of a dense steel, not just, plain old stainless steel, which is pretty common. Stainless steel is soft and it can't be made very sharp. Its softness means it's kind of durable, but it can't be made dense and acute, because at the end of the day, sharpness is a simple thing. Sharpness is acute, obtuse is dull. That's all that sharpness is. So you want a knife with dense steel, and high carbon steel is an example of that. It can be thinned to a very acute edge. And then I like more Japanese style cutlery. So I'm totally apart from the more conventional butchery knife setup because I want more sharpness than the conventional approach supplies. And the Japanese approach definitely gets there. So it's going to be a knife that is sharpenable, and Japanese shapes are sharpenable. And what I mean by sharpenable is it doesn't have a little tiny bull nose at the tip of the knife where you have a straight dimension and then a curl right at the tip, which happens to be the part you use for 99% of the cuts, which is also extraordinarily difficult to sharpen. Japanese knives don't have that characteristic. They're made to be sharpenable. They have a longer arc. And so learn how to sharpen your knife is as essential as, or more essential than acquiring even the perfect knife. And I follow a pretty orthodox Japanese method. It's just a coarse stone and a fine stone. They're water stones. And it's very simple. I do all of my sharpening beforehand, and then I'll go and I'll slaughter, 14, 15 sheep in a day, and I'll never have to hone my knife once. And that's because I'm using a good hard steel and I've learned to sharpen. It's not that complex. It's work up front rather than during the process. And key to keeping your knife sharp is a plastic knife scabbard. If you're setting your knife down in the dirt, if you're setting it on a table, if you're sticking it in a tree, or even using a scabbard, a knife holster that's made out of steel, you are dulling your knife and you're losing that essential sharpness. So I always recommend a plastic scabbard. And then you're going to need a simple gambrel, which is basically the thing that hangs the animal from its back legs during skinning and evisceration. And I kind of have one gambrel that I use for everything. So you can get one that can accommodate beef, they go all the way down to sheep. Or you could go a really easy route and just pick up a gambrel and a rope and a pulley, all as one package from any hunter supply store. They're pretty lightweight. They have got long ropes, so you can hang them from any height branch or barn beam that you can access easily. And that's all you need to hoist a lamb up and down. You don't need electric assistance necessarily with a sheep. They're not that heavy. And then you're never going to regret having a bunch of bus tubs. These are just plastic tubs that you will use for so many things. You'll use them on slaughter day to catch the guts so they don't just fall in the dirt and get dirty, giving you the opportunity to harvest liver, caul fat before it gets dirty. And it'll help you sort the cuts out on butchery day when you're making different cuts and transporting them to a refrigerator, to wrapping station. Have a mountain of bus tubs. That's just key to the efficiency of the day. And then on the day of slaughter, I just like a bucket of water. I'm not sterilizing. We're not, sterilizing the carcass. We're not hosing it really at all, which we'll talk about too. It's just a bucket of water that's quick to access so that you can dehair your hand and your knife just by dipping it in the bucket. It's much quicker than spraying with a hose, though a hose will work. It's nice to have a surface to work on, though it's not essential on slaughter day when you're eviscerating and skinning. It's nice to be able to have a table outside, to skin a lamb head on and harvest the tongue. It does help. And then all you need is a cold and dry place for that carcass to chill. And, we could say technically, you don't have to chill the carcass. You could finish pulling the guts out of that sheep and then immediately start parting things out and putting them on the salt or wrapping them for the freezer, which we'll also talk about. You will find that cutting a carcass hot is, when it's still warm with body temperature, is kind of greasy and floppy. It's difficult to make chops. You wouldn't make small cuts on a carcass that you're cutting while it's still warm. But if you can do this in the winter and you live in, the northern parts of the northern hemisphere, then you can just hoist that carcass a little higher up in the tree to keep it out of the reach of raccoons and coyotes for a night, because all you really need are refrigerator temperatures, which is, it's going to be anywhere in the 30s, even in the low 40s is fine. And even then, if it gets a little warmer than that, if your humidity is low, which it is in the winter, pretty much everywhere, you have a low relative humidity, in the 60s is fine. That carcass is still going to dry out and chill, and it'll be fine. And you can start working on it the next day. And that's the winter as your chilling method, but you can also use a garage fridge that you remove the shelves from and hang the carcass in there. Or even just hang it in an unheated building, during your cold winters. There's lots of options because fortunately, with a whole carcass like that, if things start to go off, you're gonna know, which was something we'll probably reiterate as we go, but spoilage is obvious. It's super obvious. It's not something that you're gonna be guessing about and wondering about. Which means if it's hanging in the winter and you're cutting it up, maybe it's hanging for a few days. If it doesn't stink, it's good to go. It's fine. Nothing wrong.
Cool. Well, let's move to day one, the kill day, and we'll kind of fast forward through the first part of it because you've already handling the animal, getting to that point of the kill. So we're going to talk about killing, skinning, eviscerating, and chilling, we've covered a little bit. We'll cover it briefly. So tell us about the kill. If you can just describe that so people at least can get a picture in their mind once you get to that point where you're at, what they need to do.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah. So you saw how I lay the sheep down. Pretty essential to crane its neck back like that. So its eyes and its ears are flat. And then because my knife is scary sharp, I can go all the way down to bone, which is the goal, with just 2 strokes, sometimes 1. If you're doing excessive sawing, if you have to jab into the neck just to break the skin, you have a dull knife. So get your knife way to scary sharp quality. And then your goal is to restrain the sheep again, that buildup being totally essential, with the head back and totally flat on the ground like that. And then you can aim for the larynx. You just find the Adam's apple, the larynx, which is very obvious when you have the head craned back like that. And with 2 strokes, you're going to go all the way down to spine. You're cutting through trachea, esophagus, everything, all the way down. And your knife will be stopped by the spine. That's when you know you've gone far enough, and the cut is ear to ear. And you will have 2 streams of blood shooting out, maybe several feet. And that way, the sheep will bleed out, it will exsanguinate and pass out in less than a minute. It's incredibly quick. The key is to remember, right after you deliver that kill, maintain your hold on the sheep's head, and you can reholster your knife in your plastic holster and just hold on to its body, because the sheep's going to go through death throes, which everything does, contrary to what the movies show. There's always going to be movement in a dead carcass for a little while, which is all autonomic and random firing of the nervous system. But if you see 2 streams of blood, you've got it. You hit the right target, and there's nothing more you can do to ensure a very quick death of that animal. That was well done. So that's the kill. And just maintaining a hold of the carcass the whole time until the end of the death throes is what you want to do. Maintain control. And then you have to skin the sheep. And skinning is it's kind of tricky, only because it's a tactile novelty that none of us experience anymore. So it's simple. I can describe the process to you. Objectively, it's simple. Basically, you make seams. You make what I think of as zippers across the back legs, down the belly, all the way to the kill cut, and then joining the front legs. And if you think of those seams as zippers, you're just unzipping the whole hide like you would a coat and pulling it off, because on a hided animal, there's a natural seam between hide and flesh. And the artful skinning, which is the most efficient and retains the most fat and fascia and meat on the carcass rather than leaving a bunch of it on the hide, the most artful skinning is in getting to the right seam between hide and flesh. And that is something you do with your knife. The goal of sheep skinning is just to use the knife just enough to get into that right seam, so you can immediately get yourself to a position where you can fist and pull the hide off. If you've ever done a rabbit, you can kind of pull the hide off like a wet sock. It's no different with sheep. It's just a bigger sheep, and you got to be in the right seam. So we demonstrate that in the class, and the goal is really use the knife just enough to get to the position where you can remove the hide much more quickly by fisting and pulling. And when you do it that way, you actually leave a minimum of hair on the carcass, which is ideal. And I would say too, don't sweat hair on the carcass. Like, it's okay. It's not a big deal. I still get hair on a carcass, and I've done hundreds and hundreds of sheep. So don't worry about it. If you get even maybe a little dirt on the carcass, you don't even sweat that either. And we'll talk about what to do if you get some gut spillage or anything like that. Usually the general rule is don't touch the meat. You're going to rinse off your forearm and your hand before you fist the carcass off. So all of this is very, very clean. But other than that, you don't touch the meat. It's usually our dirty hands that puts a print of dirt or whatever is on our hand sticking to the fat of the meat. So you just try to avoid that. If you do that, don't hose it off. That's usually not the best option. Your best option is just to pinch that spot where you put some dirt, lift, and just skim it off with your knife. And you would do the same approach if you spilled any gut contents, any green gut contents on the inside of the carcass. Don't spray it down, don't hose it down, don't rinse it off. That's just spreading it. Go back to that spot and pinch it, and there's several layers of fascia on the surface of the meat, and you're just pinching that surface layer of fascia and skimming it off with your knife, and done. You're not even going to notice that you lost anything. So again, even when you get to the evisceration, which is removing all the guts, you just got to get them out without trying not to puncture any tubes or sacs, and liberating any fluids. But if you do, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. It's going to be okay. The carcass is not spoiled. Let's say you even puncture the bladder. Not a big deal. The urine is sterile. It's okay. I wouldn't even rinse it if I punctured the bladder. If you puncture one of the fermentation stomachs and you get some green stuff coming out, don't worry about it. Go back and do the method where you pinch and skim off that little bit of fascia. And if you feel like you didn't get it all off, don't even worry about that. It's all fine. This is on the home scale. You are avoiding the real danger of toxicity and pathogens and spoilage just by doing this in your backyard on a small scale.
Why is that? Will you explain that real quick? Because most of us are afraid of a little bit of guts or the bladder, and that to us is the threat in this scale. Why is that not such a big deal? And what are the other things that are the big deal?
Yeah, the things that are a big deal are pathogens. And it's really good to define those. Like, that's a small category of bacteria that harms humans. That's what that is. And it's a tiny category. There's a lot of other bacteria, roughly a bagajillion, that don't affect us at all, that we just live in, especially on a farm. You're just in it all the time. And fortunately, most of those pathogens in this context, specifically in the context of a sheep, they stink. When they start to proliferate, they produce gases and aromas and slimes that are super not appetizing, that you're never going to accidentally eat. So the main reason this is different is because on a large scale where they're doing, thousands of animals in a day, and they're drawn from all over the country, to one centralized zone, that is a highly fragile environment. Not least of all because those animals are unhealthy. They do not have fully functioning immune systems because of what they're fed. There's lots of synthetic and unnatural things just in the husbandry that compromises them immunologically. So they are dirty on a level that your backyard sheep can never be dirty. Never be that dirty. And then they are required to transport and move this meat in anaerobic environments. They put it in bags, in plastic. That's really where things get sketchy, is when you're trapping air. And there's one toxin that is pretty bad, that you can't see or taste or smell or detect with your senses, and that's botulism. But that only happens where there is no oxygen. So just by doing this in the open air, you are that is not even a possibility with a whole carcass that you're trying to chill. And I always tell people too, just anecdotally, I've been slaughtering animals for a long time, something like 13, 14 years into this, and I have cut myself many times harvesting animals, and you can't just stop. And you can't bind a cut wound when it's covered in fat and water. There's no Band-Aid that sticks to that. So when I'm harvesting my animals and I've cut myself, I can promise you I have had every bodily fluid of every species of every common livestock animal mainlined into my bloodstream. Urine, blood, poop, gut contents, all of it. And it's that stuff ultimately, that's not dirty. Those are all natural things that we are biologically capable of handling if we have a relatively healthy immune system. It's the synthetic stuff or the anaerobic stuff. That's what is more dangerous.
Good to know. Let's talk about, we got a lot to cover here still, so I want to keep us moving so we can get all the way to, discussing cut and wrap.
Yeah.
And from that pasture to at least the freezer. We're not going to cover the plate and cooking today. But chilling just this is one that people really get hung up on. We've been told so much industrial. These are, again, in the industrial sense, there are these rules. There are good reasons for those rules in the industrial sense, but we often get hung up on those. So what's the balance? There is reasons to chill that are good reasons. I know that, but just help us quickly find the balance so we can understand what's doable and okay and desirable on the homestead level.
Yeah, yeah. Again, when in doubt, if it doesn't smell, if it doesn't really stink, it's okay. And what that usually means is a freshly slaughtered carcass. If it gets down into the 40s at night, it's going to be fine. It's just refrigerator temperatures, and it can even creep up above refrigerator temperatures and be fine. Because here's the thing: it's relative humidity is almost more important than mere temperature. There's a couple of factors you're taking into consideration. And if the humidity is low, it's going to be fine. Dryness is key. Contrary wise, if you have a carcass, let's say it's in a walk-in, it is 30 degrees, 33 degrees Fahrenheit, perfectly, but it's 100% relative humidity, all that meat is spoiling in the walk-in. It's all going to go off in a week or two, couple days. It's going to be covered in a slime. Because what bacteria needs to proliferate, multiply, and start eating your carcass and producing stinks and slimes is free water. That's what it needs. So just the dry, ambient, low relative humidity, again, 60% in that range is fine. That'll dry off the surface of the carcass. And that's really key. So you can even get, I know it's anathema to say, but you can get above refrigerator temperatures, and it'll be fine if it's dry. And again, your nose knows in this case.
Humans have been hunting for thousands of years without refrigeration. They often have to move their kill. They have to do a lot of things before they get it to the place. And then it never even gets refrigerated. So you guys, we got to get our head out of the industrial mindset. And what Brandon's talking about still far exceeds processes that most humans have used. Like, it exceeds as far as safety and controlling the environment than the vast majority of human existence has ever experienced in working with animals, preserving them, processing them, preserving them, and eating them. And so you're already way beyond without getting trapped into the industrial methods. And I love that. Two things before we move on so I can keep us going. How long, if you're in the ideal sense and you're going to get this chilled before beginning the butchering process, how long should you chill it?
It's a matter of taste and how much fat the carcass has. So if you want to get the most out of the carcass and dry age it, that's all dry aging is, hanging out in nice dry refrigeration for multiple days. If your carcass is a nice ewe and she's got a thick layer of fat, she can hang indefinitely in refrigeration temperatures. We're talking 30 days, 35 days, 60 days. She's just not going to spoil. If you do that with a young carcass, a young lamb that does not have a nice layer of fat around the carcass, that carcass still won't spoil, but it will kind of become jerky. It'll all just dry out a little too much for what is nice. So I say that a young lamb, no more than 5 days is kind of ideal. But again, the world's not over if it goes longer than that. Remember, you can detect if anything is going wrong. And then if it's a nice fat ewe or a very mature old wether with a fat covering, hang it as long as it'll go, and then start doing the cutting.
So I'm going to guess most people, though, aren't going to have facilities for that. The average person probably needs to get done fairly quickly. So for the sake of having an easy butchering process, cutting the animal up, what's the minimum you're shooting for?
If you just want to get the chill to the bone and solidify all the fat, which makes it much easier to make chops, and it makes the meat more structural so that when you cut it with your knife, you leave a straight edge instead of muscles sliding around. That's just a night. You'll get that in one night of hanging. So you can just butcher the next day.
And lastly, maybe you don't have the right weather, maybe you don't have the right facilities, but you're doing this and you're going to make it happen. You got a day where maybe it's just not going to get that cool at night. What do? You still got the animal to process and kill, but you're not getting into the 40s where you feel good about hanging it even overnight. What do you do?
Yeah, you can just butcher it while it's hot, and it's no problem. So you can cut up, you can part out that meat. Just don't expect to make Little chops. All chops from lamb are little because they're just small animals. But make roasts. It's all just going to be larger roasts, and you can wrap those and freeze those the day of the kill, or go on to curing them as well. So you can do it the day of, no problem.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate that. And I think that's very helpful to people to know, especially as we're trying to break free from, again, commercial industrial mindsets, that there's a lot of options here. There's a lot of in between. You as a homesteader have a lot of control, right, to work within your resources to get this done. And the more resources you have, the more you can refine it, chill it longer if you want or whatever, but you can also just get it done, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that is great. Let's go to day 2. We got to keep moving here into butchering. What do people need to know to start cutting up the animal?
They should immediately, step 1 is ignore how everyone tells you to cut meat. So ignore all of the posters on the cut sheets on the butcher shop walls with all the denuded geometric cuts. Just forget that. That's all ordered towards the commercial form. You will end up creating a lot of those cuts. They're easy. They're not that hard, but they do reflect a great deal of waste. What you want to do is learn how to braise, pan, fry, and roast. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but the key to butchery is not butchery, it's cookery. If you can learn how to cook meat, you're going to know exactly how to cut it up. Your goal with all animals, not just sheep, is to cut it so that it fits your pot, your pan, and your oven, because cooking is the final cause of this creature and of all of your meat cutting. And all you need to do is know what's tough or tender, fat or lean as you're cutting, to know whether or not it's going to go to the pot for braising, the pan for frying, or the oven for roasting. That's the whole butchery paradigm. And what that means is, if you take a piece of meat from your duly harvested sheep and you cook it up, and you can't quite remember what the technical name is of that cut, but it tastes really good, you butchered properly. That's what that means. There's no other standard for butchery. Make it fit your pot, your pan, and your oven, and just separate it by use. So the muscles that get heavy use are going to be tough. You're going to need to braise those, or slow roast them with enough fat to keep them moist during that dry heat cooking process in the oven. The tender cuts, which are going to be the muscles that the sheep almost never uses, which are going to be the 2 long tubular muscles along both sides of its spine. It's the back strap on a deer. Those are tender, which means they're already chewable. They don't need long cooking to break down fascia and connective tissue. They can just be pan fried. So you cut them to fit your pot or your pan. So that, to this day, I've been doing this a long time. That is still the paradigm I follow for cutting all animals. Make it fit your pot, your pan, and your oven, based on whether or not that muscle gets heavy use and is therefore tough, or light use and is therefore tender.
What are the bare tools people need to, approach cutting that carcass up?
Yeah, you want, of course, the scary sharp knife. We've already talked about that. A cleaver is a good one. You would use the cleaver to cut only spine, only fibrous bones. You're not going to use it to cut legs and limb, skeletal bones. A bone saw is helpful, and a wood cutting surface. That's kind of ideal, especially if you're going to be cleaving anything. You want a stout wood cutting surface that can take the blow of the cleaver without bouncing on you. If you don't have that, I wouldn't even bother with the cleaver. Just use the saw and your knife to joint the carcass out artfully. I love having a scabbard, because a lot of frustration can result when your knife handle is covered in a film of fat. And it gets covered in a film of fat when you put it on your cutting table. But if you have your knife scabbard on you, you can put it in there. And that keeps your knife hand and your knife handle dry and grippy, which means you don't have to grip the knife precisely 15% harder the whole time just to keep it from slipping out of your hand. So I like the scabbard for that reason. And then bust tubs to sort things out. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Great. So you've talked about basically the whole goal of butchery is to separate the tough from the tender, to order the entire carcass for proper cookery, knowing how to cook it. So just walk us through simply, because we can't demonstrate all of it, when you approach that carcass, just breaking it down in its like most simplest form. If you're getting started, maybe not ready to get into all the steaks and everything, but you're just taking a basic carcass. How do you approach, just cutting it up, quartering it, and getting it ready for cut and wrap in the most simple form?
Yeah, that's great. Well, the first step would be to quarter it, which is technically eighthing it. If you were to cut your lamb carcass right down the middle along the spine, you can see very clearly how a four-legged beast uses its muscles. It's very obvious. You've got the front leg, and you've got the front leg attached to the shoulder blade. That's called the shoulder, the shoulder quarter. It gets heavy use. It's all tough. So if you do nothing but separate that from the rest of the carcass, right where the sternum ends, happens to be also where the shoulder blade ends, congratulations, you have just separated the tough, heavy use muscle from the tender muscle that's up in the spine that could become your chops. And so now you've got that shoulder. And, there's how you parse that up is just a matter of efficiency. It's just got to fit your pot because you want to braise all of that because it's tough. And you melt it low and slow in a pot with liquid, and it just becomes falling off the bone tender and absolutely delicious. And then you move to the back leg. Also tough, right? It's a leg. It gets heavy use. It's connected to the pelvis, all tough musculature. And so you just sever that right where you can see the lumbar part of the spine angles up to go out to the tail. And if you can separate right on that line, you'll see there's a crook in the spine. And if you can find that crook, it happens on a disc, and you go one vertebra in the direction of the head from that disc, you will sever it there, and now you've just separated all the pelvis and the back leg muscle from the tender meat. Again, that's in the middle. And now you've got that back leg, all for roasting, rare, or curing, or braising. And then you're left with the middle, which will have a flap, which is where the belly is. That's like or a flank on, generally it's called a flank on a ruminant, a belly on a pig. And it's flat. It's also stretchy and tough because it's full of fascia. And so that needs to be braised, and you could just separate that. You'll have to saw through the ribs to do it. And then you're left with the rack, which is going to be the ribs and the short loin, where the tenderloin is and where the rib steaks could be. And that's really, on any quadruped, that's really the only spot where you have a concentration of tender meat that gets seldom used. And that's it. I mean, that's the whole butchery of that carcass, separating tough from tender.
Very cool. You guys, you can do this just with those directions. You're not going to go wrong. And I think that's one thing I want to communicate is that people are so fearful. We're so tied up to the charts and what we get at the store or what the butcher says. You just got to go into it and take what Brandon's saying and do it. And over time, you'll refine it, and you can create more of what you want. But this is literally how we started. We just started doing it, and you can have confidence to tackle that. And that leads us into kind of preserving those cuts so that they can go into the freezer to be ready for cooking when you're ready. So just take us through some important things to know and do in the wrapping stage.
Yeah. The freezer, unfortunately, it's important to know that it does not preserve your meat. It just slows down its inevitable deterioration, its inevitable demise. And the way the freezer ultimately destroys meat, it just takes a while. And the way it does that is through freezer burn. And that only happens when there's oxygen touching the flesh in the freezer. And so the whole point of wrapping the meat is to prevent that contact of oxygen on the surface of the meat. And I like to do that with cling wrap. And unfortunately, if you're gonna do this well and butcher without trimming anything, which we didn't mention, but we mentioned it sort of by not mentioning it, there's no need to trim anything on the carcass. It's all good. It can all fit in your pot, your pan, and your oven and be made delicious. If you're not going to trim anything, you're all going to have bone-in cuts. You're going to want to wrap it with cling wrap. And plastic is just kind of part of it if you're going to freeze it. I try to avoid plastic as much as I can. You can hang the carcass. A sheep is a small thing. You can definitely hang it long enough such that you consume all of it before you have to even think about freezing it. So we actually do that a lot in my family, but we're kind of large. There's 10 of us. But if you're going to freeze it, you're going to use cling wrap. And I prefer cling wrap. You can get it at any restaurant supply store. But the point of the cling wrap is to achieve contact with every millimeter of surface area of every cut. So the reason it works is because instead of oxygen touching the meat, it's cling wrap. That's how it does it. And then the paper, you only apply butcher paper to it. It doesn't insulate it. It doesn't serve any other practical purpose other than giving you something to label on. It's really the cling wrap that does it. And I even argue that cling wrap is a more sure way to preserve your meat than a chambered vacuum sealer, which is very expensive. You got to get the right bags, and you got to you got to basically keep everything boneless. So you find yourself cutting the carcass for the chambered vacuum sealer to work properly, not for your pot, your pan, and your oven, which is the point. So, and even the chambered vacuum sealer works by drawing a vacuum, pulling out all the air, and the plastic sucks to the meat, but you just have one hole. One hole is necessary to compromise the whole bag. You get one puncture and one layer of plastic, and that meat is going to get freezer burn. And freezer burn meat is inedible. It's a bummer.
Home scale vacuum sealers are prone to failure.
Yep.
You guys listen to what Brandon's tell you. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've done it the hard way. Carol and I have tried all of these methods, and we've come to these conclusions right here. But from lots of lost meat due to freezer burn, due to failed vacuum sealers, to experimenting with different wrappings, and we came to the same conclusion. So just pick up where Brandon's leading you and start right there, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and if you wrap it properly, it'll last for over a year in your freezer quite well. And it can get holes in it, and it'll be okay because we're not dependent upon a completely homogeneous airtight seal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wow, we've kind of covered a lot here, and we went a little bit long, but that's okay. This is a lot to cover. And Brandon, thank you for walking us through this. I always learn something new. I know everybody else has here. And I want you to hang on for a minute, Brandon. I want to talk to people about how they can go deeper and fill in the details and get more exact guidance from you and from your class for a minute. And then we're going to come back and field some questions and do some giveaways. So we'll be right back with you, Brandon, in a minute. You guys, what do you do from here? What's next? Homestead Butchery is, in one way, it's really simple, but it's also a huge topic to get into the details and get proficient at it. And there's a lot more to learn. So what do you do? Where do you go from here? And there's really two options. You can trial and error, and you can definitely take what you've learned today and trial and error and pick up a few other YouTube videos, and you're going to get down the road. But it's going to be a bit of a longer journey. You can Google it. You can do all these things and keep going with this free training, and you will get there. But it's a longer journey. You're going to have more failures. That's just the journey you go through. Or you can take the simple and strategic path, which is what we've worked to create here at the School of Traditional Skills. For those of you that want to accelerate the journey, that want to get all the in-between details without constantly searching YouTube and Google. We do as many of these free trainings as we can. We can only cover so much. So how about learning from an expert who is ahead of you in their journey? Like I was saying there, I learned the hard way. I learned over 20 years. I came to the conclusion of exactly what Brandon was saying through doing all the different things and banging my head on the wall and trying different stuff. And you really don't need to walk that road. You can step a little faster here by going through the journey with someone who will help you cut through all the noise from their experience, their mistakes, that you don't have to make them from yourselves, along with joining up with a community of people who are in this together. Of course, it's obvious which option I'm a fan of. I wish I had this option many, many years ago. And so I want to show you how to get access to Brandon's full-length Pasture to Plate Homestead Butchery class in the School of Traditional Skills. It approaches homestead butchery through the processing of a sheep, which is a great way to start. It's attainable, it's doable. You can apply it to a few other animals, and it's going to help you build skills and confidence before you move on to other things. This is one of the most in-depth classes we've ever produced. There is nearly 4 hours of video instruction, and this is not filler time. This isn't hours of filler. This is walk you through step by step every detail of the way, of all the way through the details of that kill, all the way through the details of skinning, the things that we obviously can't take 4 hours a day. You don't have time for that. But we go through it in a very, very precise way, step by step through the entire process of harvesting and butchering and getting this animal into your freezer and even into the plate. Brandon even shares some of his cooking recipes with you. And in this class, you're going to discover the complete list of tools and supplies you need for homestead butchery. We covered a lot of them today, but it's a few more details that's gonna get you through, and where to go to get those things so you don't have to search. And if you just want to get the tools, we provide you resources just to get those tools, so you don't have to spend your time trying to pick which knife or which this or which that. We're going to help you get there. The entire lesson and the entire discussion on that sheep jiu-jitsu and how to handle that animal properly, along with, and this is something we didn't want to really show publicly and free, but how to deliver in detail that clean, fast, humane kill and what to look for and why. And there's nothing like having the visuals and having somebody there. This is the closest you're going to get besides going to a live presentation, which some of you can do. Some of you have seen Brandon, or maybe you'll get to go somewhere where he teaches or others do, but there's only a few of us really that can do that. We've gotten you as close to being right with Brandon as possible with these classes so that you can really learn the details. You can, even better than that live presentation, you can go back to these and go, well, what was that? What was that one little thing he did that it really made a difference? You're going to be able to go back and find it easily. You're going to learn how to properly hang, skin, and eviscerate this animal to the point of zero waste if you want to. Some of you may not be ready for that, but there's a lot of pieces of the animal and things that we can do that we throw away that we don't need to, including the head and the tongue. And I know that, maybe freaks some people out, but we want to be good stewards. We want to be efficient with what we're doing. And maybe that's down the road for you, but he's going to show you how to do that instead of just throwing it away, which is what most butchery does. That's just getting up to the actual butchering process. The exact steps that Brandon follows to go from whole carcass to recognizable cuts of meat quickly and efficiently. How to wrap the meat so it lasts as long as possible in the freezer. Again, it's great to talk about it, but if you want more details, you want to increase your confidence, we're going to take you right through that moment by moment, step by step. And alternative options if you don't want to or don't have room to freeze your meat. There are alternatives. And so this class is going to help. This is not just a 15-minute how-to video. It's a comprehensive class with 24 professionally filmed and produced video lessons. It's broken up so that you can easily go back and find the pieces that you want and the information you want. You might get hung up in one place. You don't have to search through an hour-long video or a 45-minute video or go back and what was that video on YouTube. You can go right back. It's broken down. It's easy to go back and find those bits and pieces. And that is particularly important with this skill, where you can go and re-watch somebody do it over and over again until you really get it into your mind. And you're going to feel like Brandon is right there with you, except that you didn't just get to see it once in a live presentation. You, like I said, you can keep coming back and he's going to guide you over and over. This is like taking a college level course in small scale butchery, you guys. And Brandon explains it in simple terms that even brand new beginners are going to get their heads wrapped around, and you're going to be able to approach this with confidence. Now, we don't just do the videos. A lot of us people, as homesteaders, are very tactile. And so if you're the kind of person that likes to learn by reading and writing, we've got you covered, because along with the video lessons, we also provide a downloadable and printable, in this case, 54-page skill sheet. And skill sheet's really light. This is a little mini booklet that puts all the details into print to go along with the class so that you can print that up if you want and have it, on the table next to you or take it out with you. And that's just really, really valuable for many of us that are trying to learn this way, having that to be able to hold into your hands. Brandon's also got another class with the school, 2 classes and with the school of traditional skills. So if you raise pigs, or you maybe are thinking about being able to purchase a pig and process it yourself, you're going to love the other class on curing pork the traditional way. Very simple, very easy, long time curing. This is a start into curing meats without refrigeration. A lot of these things you can do with other meats, but pork is a great way to start. And you'll be amazed at how simple and inexpensive and easy it is to create prosciutto, bacon, and delicious hams in your own kitchen. Brandon brings the same expertise, same depth of knowledge that you've seen here today in both of his classes. Imagine that first dinner where you serve these kinds of foods, food that you raised, that you harvested yourself, that you processed. There's nothing like sharing that with your family and slicing into a piece of meat that, again, you raised, you harvested, you butchered, you cured or cooked yourself. These kinds of meals, they're different from what most of us are used to. These meals are special, and they're meant to be savored and appreciated, and they're meant to be shared. And you'll want to share them. And it's on in our family, it's a bonding experience. It's something that we really, really enjoy, that brings us together to sit at the table. And that's what these classes do. That's what they're all about. Not just Brandon's classes, but all of the classes at the School of Traditional Skills. And I want you to get access to this right away so you can keep learning and you can bless your family table as soon as possible. Now, like I just mentioned, the cool thing about the School of Traditional Skills is that you don't just get one class. You don't just get 2 classes. Brandon's classes say you get the entire library, which right now is 21 classes, plus every new class we release for as long as you're a member at no extra charge. You get access to all of them, same high quality classes. And in fact, in just a few weeks, we're launching a brand new class that perfectly complements Brandon's Pasture to Plate class. It picks up and actually touches on some of the things he talks about, goes into detail, but a little more from the cooking angle. He's kind of approaching it from the butchering angle, ending with some cooking. Our class with Shannon Hayes from Sapbush Hollow Farm is going to take you to the next level in preparing that meat and knowing how to work with not only sheep, but all of the most common animals that we have on the farm. That's coming in just a couple weeks. And so if you join us today, you're going to have access to that. Brandon talked about a knife, keeping that knife sharp. We have a class because knives are the most used tool on the homestead. We have an excellent class on sharpening your knife, taking care of it, and making sure that you have that tool ready to go to use in something like Brandon's class. Of course, we've got a lot of classes on traditional cooking and food preservation, bread making, bone broth with Sally Fallon, canning with my wife, Carolyn. Lisa Bass teaches you how to ferment vegetables, both for increasing your health and short to midterm preservation. We dive into gardening. If you're a beginner, there's classes on raised bed gardening, like Brian Lowell's class, Next Level Gardening, all about raised bed gardening, but it's really how to get started and really create some systems, whether you're a beginner or you're along your way a little bit and you want some good systems for gardening. He's going to take you on that journey along with Paul Gauchi and Melissa K. Norris and others. We also take you through raising your own meat, whether that's pasture-raised chickens with Justin Rhodes, or pasture management with Joel Salatin, or goats with Anna of All Trades, and dairy cows with the Dohertys. We're going to help get you there. These classes have been organized to help you on your journey, wherever you're at, to self-sufficiency and resiliency through these different areas of traditional skills to bring you proficient. There's so many classes here. I can't cover them all right now. I just want to give you an example of how much is here for you and how much this is going to help you accelerate your journey, get you out of that frustration of always searching for these answers and looking around the internet and Google and YouTube and all of that. But more than that, what's really maybe even larger than that is the thriving community at the School of Traditional Skills. There's a common thread with homesteaders and folks who just want to live a simple, more natural life. And whether they're living in the city and they're just getting started, or they're already out on the land and out on the country, they wish they could find more people to connect with who are doing the same things. Eventually, we're going to grow this, and there's going to be people everywhere doing this right around you. But right now, it's still challenging. A lot of you don't have community. A lot of people don't understand what you're doing. And we have a phenomenal community inside the School of Traditional Skills. It's an incredible place where you can walk together with others on the same journey, learning the same content, journeying together as you're processing, as you're doing these different skills, celebrating your wins, figuring out your challenges and your problems. This is a community that's 10,000 strong that you are going to love. There's homesteaders, there's hobbyists. They're discussing the classes, what they're doing on their properties, what they're learning. They're celebrating together. And I'd love to get you access to this community. not just for Brandon's class, but with all of the other ones that are going to help you in your journey. Because learning these skills, being a part of this tribe is going to change your life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's what some of the School of Traditional Skills members have to say. Laura says, I'm so thankful to be a part of this community and these classes again this year. During the last year, I've gained so much confidence and encouragement that in spite of a difficult year, I've still been able to take baby steps and source raw milk, start making yogurt again, making blackberry jelly, and gain a vision of what we can do with our land. And Rebecca says, we are loving all the videos. We can't get enough. We're learning so much and implementing changes to our homestead. Thank you all so much for the hard work that you do. Thank you, Rebecca. We're honored to be on this journey together. And, butchering your own meat does make it taste better, as Brandon says. It's a different kind of meat. It's a different kind of experience all together. And anything we can do to limit our dependence on the grocery store is a good step in my mind. And this is what School of Traditional Skills is all about, giving you the knowledge and the wisdom you need to gain more independence and more freedom. It's hard to put into words the values these classes bring. But, the old saying goes, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. These are the skills that grandparents and parents used to pass on to the next generation. And they are the skills modern people need to be more resilient and to be able to take care of themselves and their families, regardless of what's happening around them. I think that's something that we're all looking for, to take care of ourselves now and hopefully to pass this on to the next generation. When we invest in learning, that's acquiring new insights and new skills. We're nurturing the seeds of wisdom that will give us the tools we need to build the life we want. But knowledge alone is not enough. We need guides to come alongside us and teach us not just the skill, but the wisdom that comes from years of applying the skill. That's what every one of these classes is. They're like inviting a friend or a grandparent or a wise neighbor into your life by your side so that they can share what they know. You don't just get a useful skill, you get a caring, trusted guide to walk you through it. So look, if you're interested in joining more than 10,000 members to take not only your meat smith skills, but all your homesteading skills to the next level, all you need to do is to click the button below this video. The best part, we've got a special limited time offer set up for you to celebrate this live event, because we want to give as many people as we can the opportunity to be a part of this incredible journey and to help accelerate your journey to health, freedom, and security. Now, ordinarily, an annual membership to the School of Traditional Skills costs $290. If you go on our website and check that out, that's the normal price. You can see the value, what you get for that. It's already incredible. But if you're here hanging out with us right now, I know you're serious about learning these skills and you've been with us for an hour and a half. And so we're cutting the price of the annual membership by more than 30% for a limited time for just $199. When you join the skill, like I mentioned, you're going to get Brandon's full class, his pork class, access to our entire library of classes and skill sheets at no additional charge. All the new classes we release for as long as you remember, and I'm going to suggest that you start with the annual membership. It is the best value. We do have a monthly if you need to start there, but the annual is the best value, and you'll get all the classes that come out in the next year. You get access to our members community. You get access to all the skill sheets that are downloadable. You can keep those. You get access to the resources where we help you get the tools that you need more quickly. So that's a whole nother journey to go on and spend all the time searching and Googling for the right tools. All of our classes are going to provide resources for you to help you get there quickly. Our instructors come back. If you join today and take this class, you've got time to watch it. And Brandon Sheard is going to come back for members only, where we get full 2 hours with him to just answer questions after you've seen the class to fill things in a little bit. There's exclusive invites to more live events like this ones. You get all the recordings of previous ones, because we love our classes, but there's always something special about these live trainings. There's always nuggets of wisdom and things happening that are really, really valuable. So members have, access to all of that training. And that's all just for $199, you guys. That's less than most families spend on a single trip to the grocery store. Even if the only skill you were to learn is home butchering, you're going to save that much easily. I'm sure a lot more by not paying grocery store meat markups. In fact, many of our members say that the skills they learn help them save so much money that the membership actually pays for itself. And it will, I guarantee it will, if you put these skills to work. And I guarantee it so much that we offer a full 30-day back money guarantee. You can get in there, take as much content as you want, and learn as much as you want. And if 30 days you're not satisfied and don't feel that this is home for you, a place where you want to keep learning, we'll give you the money back. No questions asked. So again, I want to invite you to join the School of Traditional Skills today for that 30% discount. Join myself and Brandon and Carolyn and Jill Salatin, Sally Fallon, and so many, many more on this journey to help you along your way. So take some time, go check that out, click the link. It'll take you to another page. It'll leave this page open and join us, or maybe you're going to have a few questions during the Q&A. Feel free to drop us those questions, and I'll try to answer those about the school as well. With that, we're going to go ahead and get back to the Q&A. Here's what I want you guys to do. Brandon's going to come back in and join us, and I want you to start dropping your questions in the Q&A section of the chat. And while you're doing that and our moderators getting those questions up on queue, we're also going to have a giveaway, and we're going to randomly pick some of you guys that are here to give away a membership, Brandon's knife that you saw him using there, and this booklet, Homestead Mindsets. So let's see here. Let me get over to my doc and see what questions we've got to get us started. Let's see here. Ashley is asking, I'd like to know about butchering deer if possible. Anything you could share, or I would add any, are there any particular details that's different about a deer, Brandon, that people need to know?
That's one thing I forgot to mention, that this lamb class is everything in the lamb class transfers directly to deer. So the skinning process, everything, the butchery, how you would part out a deer carcass, you could do it precisely how you see it done in the lamb class, and it would be excellent. The only difference might be generally that the evisceration of a deer tends to happen before the skinning, because you're out in the field. And so usually, if you're going to pack it in, you end up quartering in the field as well, with the hide on or removed, depending on how best you can keep the carcass, the meat, clean. But at the end of the day, you're still dividing the carcass on the same spots as in the lamb class, along the same lines, and you're still utilizing, the most efficient way to skin that deer, which would be to find the proper seam and fist and pull that hide off, just like in the lamb class. So, yeah, I mean, it's all, if you can do a lamb well, then you can do a goat and a deer. It's the same process. Very cool. Good to know. We're going to give away right now the Homestead's Mindsets from the 2023 Traditional Skills Summit. And that book is going to Julie Flynn. Julie, make sure you email us here. I think the email is up on the screen, and claim your prize, and we'll get that in the mail to you. Let's see here. Karma Ann asks, are the rest of the sheep aware of where that one is going and won't be back? Or do you practice taking them all out and holding them this way throughout their life? So, I think kind of what are they going through their head? Are they worried about this? Do they know what's happening? The other ones, what's going on there? That's a really good question. And I think that they do know, and they're okay with it, is the short answer. And what I would say is it's a judgment call. So the goal is to maintain the peace, both for the lamb that you're about to slaughter and the herd. And for each slaughter, you kind of judge how best to do that. So in the case of the class situation, when I went in there and grabbed that sheep in that context of that tight corral, I could see that the other sheep were not happy about my proximity. And so they were maybe made anxious by how close I was to them. And so for the sake of the herd, to calm them down a little bit, I took the sheep out. But it wasn't because they would be more likely to have anxiety and fear by seeing that sheep die. They're actually okay with that. And so it's just a thing that you discern each time. Sometimes to maintain calmness for the whole flock, you remove the sheep just to get your presence away from them, and then they'll calm back down. And that would be the main reason to separate that sheep for the kill.
Okay. Amy Gard asks, this is a thoughtful question here, looking out ahead. Any tips for the head positioning when working with horned sheep?
Yeah, it seems like it could be a challenge, but the horns actually, you might find them to be a bit of an advantage because it gives you these two, a more broad, wider stand almost to angle that head back and just keep it all the way flat on the ground. So, excuse me, I would say it's not a disadvantage. It actually is a little easier, and you do the same thing. You just keep that head totally flat, so that the jaw is completely oriented, straight towards the sky. And the horns can actually give you a wider platform to hold the head there. So it can actually be an advantage. The only trick would be if those horns, sometimes they come down so far that they interfere with your kill cut, in which case you just have to angle your knife down and in between the horns to get the cut. And if your knife is sharp, that is no problem whatsoever. It doesn't hinder anything, but your knife has got to be sharp.
Yeah, something about the sharp knife to make this whole process work keeps coming up.
Yeah, it's key.
Jaretta Wyndham is asking, how old or what weight is optimal for a young ram to reach for harvesting?
That's a good question, and I wish I could just give you a simple answer, but I'm going to say there's a big misconception out there that older animals don't taste good, or that especially sheep, they become mutton, and that's gross. This is categorically wrong. Older animals get more flavor and have more marbling. So I haven't found the top limit of that. A 15-year-old ewe is going to be delicious. And I know that sounds counterintuitive and crazy, but it is an objective fact. And even the muscles on her body that are seldom used, they're still going to be tender, because toughness is more a matter of physiology, less than it is of age. So, but to all of that being said, what is the ideal age? On the homestead, it is whatever serves your management best. Maybe you can't afford hay that year to keep sheep over the winter. That's a good reason to kill your ram. Because there's not going to be necessarily for the homestead an optimal perfect age to slaughter that sheep, that before which or after which you really experience some sort of loss. That is all for the commercial scene, where they are measuring the gains and the value of that sheep purely in dollar signs, and in fat content, specifically low fat content. So they're trying to harvest those sheep at the max of their leanness so that they don't get an extra ounce of fat on them. All of that is totally alien to the proper management of your farm. So the official answer is slaughter that ram when it is best for you to slaughter that ram, whatever you want to, and he will be absolutely delicious. If I had to pick a time, I like my sheep 2 years old. That's why I love the flavor. They're great. They've got a lot of fat at that time. But again, that's just personal preference. So whenever it makes sense for you, that's the time to slaughter the ram.
It's hard to overstate how much industrial processes influence our thinking and what we assume is normal. And this is one of them. All the things that you usually hear about how old an animal should be, most of the time, it's coming because there's a certain age that works well for the industrial process. And so much of our knowledge, that's one of the things we're trying to overcome in the school. And one of the things I appreciate about you, Brandon, is just helping us move past those constraints, because they are constraints at the homestead level and things that hold us back from confidence and operating in a way that works well for us and each individual situation, which can be different.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with a ram, like maybe you want to slaughter him before he mounts his mom. Kill him.
That would be a good idea.
Do it. It's serve your management on your farm.
Right. Yeah. Let's see here. I want to do another giveaway. We're going to go to the knife, the butchering knife there that you saw Brandon use, and it's the knife he recommends in the class that he uses every day. And John Plaskis, you have won that knife. Excited to be able to give that to you. Make sure you email in there the email on the screen so that we can get your information and get that sent out to you. Excited to be able to do that. Charlotte Springer is asking, how deep does the cut need to be to cut through the jugular?
All the way to the bone. And sort of the thing that I say is when you go to kill a lamb, there's no such thing as overkill. If you're going to err on a side, get it done all the way. And so the depth of the cut is going to be all the way to bone, which means your knife is going to stop. You're going to cut through everything that is cuttable, all flesh, all trachea, all carotid and jugular arteries, right down to the vertebra of the neck. So that's how far you go with your knife.
Okay. Let's see here. Diana Mallet asks, is it important to remove the skin before eviscerating?
It is only simpler, I would say. It's not vital. With the guts inside the body, it kind of makes the flank taut. And that just happens to be an easier surface against which to fist off the hide. But no, it's not strictly necessary. And if you're hunting, you tend to gut out in the field anyway, and then remove the hide later without the guts inside. And that's perfectly acceptable.
Cool. Let's see here. Somebody is asking, I don't have a name, but will STS do a pig butchering class? And yes, I'm sure we will eventually, and we know a great guy to do it. We were decided to tackle the first butchery class besides chickens on a ruminant and something that just seems broadly relative to the homestead, but pigs is right behind that as far as homestead butchery. And so I would imagine, I don't want to give a promise on a date, but I know it's in our view. So we'll get there. A lot of things to choose from. Let's see. Well, Julia Lords asked, are there any uses to the contents of the rumen? I'm aware of the use of rennet from young harvested ruminants, but what about adult animals?
Well, I think traditionally it would be a direct reflection of, in the case of a male, his masculinity, how much rumen he can take on his tripe soup. If you cook it low and slow. So the official answer is there's not necessarily a culinary one. I know that my farm canines, they tend to be carnivorous unless there are rumen contents, so they can appreciate that. They'll eat a few vegetables, but only if it comes in the stomach of a lamb or a sheep. And then other than that, I've always just added them to my compost pile. I mean, talk about a great thing to put into the garden after it cooks down a little bit. Definitely compost.
Yeah, if you're not going to eat it, compost it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see. Karen Whitesell says, if you detect spoilage, do you just cut it off and keep working with it? I mean, I think she means keep working with the animal after you cut off the spoilage.
Yeah, that's a good question. Fortunately, it tends to be pretty obvious and it can be localized. It really can. So yes, in most situations, you can do that. You don't have to, if you see, let's see, what would be a common spoilage is so uncommon. It's actually a challenge for me to pick what a common occurrence would be. But let's say you get some mold growth on the inside of the carcass, and maybe there's some spilled blood in there, and it's actually finally starting to smell, starting to stink. Maybe because in the neck there's some blood that was trapped still in a carotid artery, which is very unlikely if you get a good bleed, a good kill cut. But in that case, you would just remove the parts that smell, and it would be very obvious because not only will they smell, they'll probably be slimy. They'll be to the touch. They will actually have a visible and tactile slime on them. And so, yes, you could just cut those parts away. And then as you're cutting the meat, you'll find out no stink up here. And that's because the bacteria didn't travel up there when you get to the rest of the animal. So it is perfectly fine to do that, to cut away those nasty parts.
Great. Ken T would love your suggestion on a knife. So what is that knife that you use and love?
Yeah, I have been, and I like this one because it's readily available and it's easy to acquire and it's not too expensive. But it also checks all the lists of being high carbon steel and Japanese shape. It's a Masahiro boning knife, Masahiro. Masahiro boning knife, and they have several fancy versions of it, but the Rose line of knives is the one that I use, just meaning it has a rosewood handle. And it happens to be a chisel edge, so it only has a bevel on one side, like a chisel, and one side is flat. One side has the bevel, which is literally half the work to sharpen, which is awesome.
Moderators, maybe you can drop that in. That's the one we're giving away. Maybe you can just drop it into the chat so people can copy and paste if they want. Also, if you'll let me know about the giveaways, did other folks claim their gifts? Moderators, if you'd let me know that. We've got one more giveaway, but I want to make sure. Okay, Julie Flynn and John have not claimed yet. Hopefully you're here. Maybe they left. We will give those away if they don't claim it in the next couple of minutes here. We'll call out another name. So moderators, make sure and you get me some suggestions there. And we still got a lifetime to give away. You guys, if you're here and you're considering the school, make sure get your questions to me. If you don't have time today, you can always email in at hello@schooltraditionalskills. Let's take another question. Karen Whitesell says, some butchers double wrap in paper. Does that not work?
I would say the same thing that I said regarding a chambered vacuum sealer. So if you butcher your sheep when you're doing the meat cutting, and each cut you are designing to be wrapped in butcher paper without plastic and frozen, then yes, it works. So basically you have to have boneless cuts that are all kind of shaped like, I don't know, squashed footballs or something. They all have to have a very homogeneous, even shape with no hard edges, such that you can get paper to cling to every single square millimeter of the surface of that meat. Then it works. So I just find the plastic to be a much better way because it allows me to butcher for the pot, the pan, and the oven, not for the paper or for the wrapping method, if that makes sense. So it's possible, but very difficult. And usually I don't think people do a very good job at it.
Yeah. Okay. Melissa Oxner wants to know if you can butcher and process a pregnant animal.
Yes. I mean, you try to avoid it because usually it's usually accidental. You didn't know that she was carrying a lamb or two. But technically speaking, there's nothing wrong with that meat. It's all fine. You can consume that or pig or whatever it might be. Yeah, it's just kind of a bummer to lose that new life on the farm.
Yeah. Let's see. This is a School of Traditional Skills question from Susan Ponder. Can a year purchase of STS be applied to a lifetime membership if you decide to spend the extra dollars? Susan, we don't have an automated way to do that, but any member can upgrade within the plan that they've signed up for. So like today, we're doing a discounted plan. If you sign up for that annual, which is what we recommend monthly, and you want to upgrade later, you can do that. Depending on where you're at in the cycle, we can work with you manually to work on crediting you, and we just got to handle that on a case-by-case basis. So if you're already a member, just email in. Or if you're thinking about you want to get a membership today and then possibly upgrade, if you're happy with it, feel free to do that and we will work with you. Let's see here. It looks like John and Julie claimed their prizes. Wonderful. We got a few more minutes. I'll give away that lifetime in just a minute. Let's get to know a couple questions. Let's see. Sally Hudson is asking, do you hang the animal to drain the blood?
No, in the case of a sheep, it is not necessary. It will happen, when you hang it for the skinning and the evisceration, a little more blood will come out. But really, the exsanguination, the bleeding, is coming from the beating heart. So when you just kill them with a knife, their heart continues to beat for a while, and that's why you get those continuous streams of blood spraying out. And that's how they bleed out, is the heart is pumping it out. So it is not necessary to hoist them up real quick and get them upside down to let gravity drain them out. It's blood pressure that's doing it.
Okay. Let's see. Leland Fallon is asking, is there a breed of sheep that has amazing flavor of meat for northern states with bad winters?
Northern states with bad winters. People do get pretty particular about breeds, but I say by and large, the breeds that are available to us readily. By us, I mean on the continent. It's really just a matter of which sheep fits your climate best in the grasses that you have. So if you have to worm that sheep and treat it and call the vet out 7 times and assist at its birth, that sheep doesn't work for your farm. And that also isn't going to taste that great. So the ones that thrive in your place, whatever that is, that's the breed for you and will taste the best because it's going to be thriving, right? It's going to make the most use of the forage that you happen to have. And that will result in the best flavor. The general rule is wool sheep, people, they have a reputation for being a little more lamby in flavor than hair sheep. But I even find that breaks down to a certain point. And I also think that, if you're raising lamb, but you don't want lamby meat, you might be disappointed. So go ahead and embrace the lamb flavor 100% and just raise what works for you.
Brandon, I don't know about you. In my experience, home raised sheep, and we've raised many different breeds, usually a dual purpose that is a wool purpose because Carolyn wants the wool. In different locations, home raised sheep are milder. They're still lambier. Now maybe my palate's just changed over the years, but we've had people come to our house many times, time and time again. I don't like lamb. I've had it lots of times. I've tried it in restaurants. I've tried it from the store. I don't like it. And they have it at our house and they're like, whoa, I had no idea. Yeah. And this is different. We've lived high and dry. We lived in the South and now we're up here in the North and we've experienced that across the board over the last 15, 18 years. And so just I say that for you guys to get confidence that you got to try it. It's not the same thing as what you get at the store in the restaurant.
Yeah. And that's because the most decisive ingredients in any recipe is going to be how the animal was raised and how it was killed. So the sheep that you're raising at your place, like we say, they are not just better flavor. Like it's not just a difference in degree, but in kind. It's a totally different thing than the store-bought sheep. It is effortlessly delicious because you're raising it properly and harvesting it well. You don't have to coax flavor out of it and do complex recipes with a myriad of ingredients. It's like just salt it enough and don't burn it to a crisp. Learn how to braise, pan, fry, and roast. That's it. And it will be logic-defyingly delicious. It's going to be unexpectedly rewarding, way more than you thought it would be, just because you're doing it on a small scale. So it's effortless.
Let's see. We're going to take a few more questions and do that last giveaway. Excited to be able to give away a lifetime membership to the School of Traditional Skills in Louis Swart. Louis Swart. You have won a lifetime membership to the School of Traditional Skills, and it's yours forever. All the downloads, all the videos, everything we ever add, the community, and anything else we ever do, it is yours. Make sure and claim that while we're here today. I want to get to a couple more questions. You guys don't forget to check out the school. If you've been with us for a couple hours, you're obviously serious. Let's journey on this road together. Let's get you in deeper, get you learning from Brandon and all of our instructors. Let's see here. I'm scrolling for a couple more good, relevant questions. Brandon, what's the best deep freezer temperature for storing most meats? I'll leave it at that. By Kimberly. Is there a temperature goal I'm looking for?
In a deep freeze? Was that what you said?
Yeah. She says deep freezer. I mean, okay. There is most deep freezers, they have a little bit of range in them. They don't always tell you what the temperature is, but.
Yes. Yeah. I know a lot of people get particular about that, and those people know more about freezers than I do. What I do is, honestly, I try to avoid the freezer if I can. But when I do, I wrap it properly, and I use whatever chest freezers I can acquire locally. I find chest freezers to be more efficient in their use of power, easier to organize and access things. And ultimately, I don't worry about the precise temperature. I'm not going for sub-zero or whatever, people generally seek out, because I'm not dependent upon the freezer as my primary means of storing the yield. It's an option, that can be a little more convenient that we'll utilize. And I've never had a problem with freezer burn or anything as a result of that particular approach.
Good question here from Stephanie Birch. She says, you recommended that our children know that our animals are for slaughter from the beginning. What age approximately do you suggest before they can participate? Good question.
Yeah, I find that children will only have a hard time with it if they are taught to. And so I've never had a cutoff age, so to speak, where I try to shield them from the reality of killing an animal. If you're on a homestead, and especially if you're homeschooling kids of all ages, they are everywhere all the time. They're going to be with you out there doing the chores and harvesting sheep. And I think the best way for them to understand what's going on, to categorize it, is to see you do it well and to complete the whole narrative for them, because then they'll understand the final cause immediately just by seeing it done, which I think is much more effective than talking at them about it, trying to give them verbal context and all of this, especially when they're real young. So I've never shielded my kids from it at all. And I think it's helped because ultimately they understand action. They understand where the sheep goes. And when they see that whole story, they get it, which means they could have an initial response of sorrow, of sadness. They might get a little teary if they see an animal die at your hand, but that is proper. Death is sad. And I don't think that needs to be corrected at all. That can wash over them, and they will continue to see where that meat goes and the purpose that it serves on the family table. And that usually is, I think, the best approach for the kiddos.
Agreed. Hey, Louise claimed her prize. Louise, welcome to the School of Traditional Skills. We're out of time here. There's over 1,000 of you here still. I want to encourage you to come join us for the journey. This conversation continues in the community. You can never get through all the questions. Many of these will get answered either in the class or in the community with your peers and with our moderators. And that's really the place to pick this up. You guys come over and join us. Come check it out. There's no risk to you. And come explore Brandon's classes, and let's walk down this road together as we build health, freedom, and security. I want to thank Brandon and all you guys. Thank Brandon for coming and spending a couple hours with us today to share his knowledge. He's going to come back in a couple of weeks for members only to dive into a little deeper detail. We'll have 2 hours to spend with Brandon after you've been able to have a chance to take his class and really ask more pointed questions. That's a really, really rich experience to get to do that. So thanks, Brandon, for your time. It's been great to hang out with you today. And I just want to wish all of you well on your journey, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.